6 years ago, when I walked into Arlington County government, after doing public engagement in the Obama administration for years, found very disjointed environment where there was no dedicated engagement staff. Comm staff was not connected to the engagement activities, and engagement was happening really based on individual preference, whether that was an engineer, a program person, a planner, a policymaker, or a budget maker. So we came in and we really established a core set of values. I think it's really important that we all understand that engagement is about, it's a value exchange. And so starting there is just really critical. Moving forward with that, I wanted to talk about our budget engagement process. And so this is a busy timeline. This is taken in a year where we had both budget and CIP, but laying it out for the community, laying it out internally for all of our teams. The budget involves every department, and understanding, kind of where we're engaging, when, how we're engaging, where, from the very beginning of early input all the way through public hearings. And so with that, a multi-tiered approach using digital strategy and in the community. It's an ebb and flow of using online tools and between online tools and boots on the ground, as we call it. And we like to call that engagement 3.0. And the first part of that is making sure there's a level playing field. So we live in Arlington. We're a well-educated community. We live across the river from federal government. Federal government is in Arlington. And so, but we have people that are very well, they're knowledgeable, they follow, they track, they love to play budget director. And we have folks that are just coming to this engagement for the first time. So, this is just one example of creating a level playing field. It's not the only one that we used. We use a multi-prong approach. So virtual town halls. We've gone out and done roundtables and listening session in the communities where senior executives are sitting with 20, 30 participants. And I apologize if you're seeing those pop-ups, and really an interactive dialogue. But we're also using a lot of online engagement tools. And so with those online engagement tools, right now we're using a tool called Public Input, asking some different questions, but based on what will inform the county manager's budget proposal. In this particular year, we were really interested in what the community felt about taxes and fees. In a tough budget year, how important are things? Are they important long-term or short-term? Are they immediate needs for the community? And I really want to stress stakeholder mapping. Sometimes we just don't take time to sit and think about within the budget, who cares about those segments of the budget? And so aligning who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do we know, and what are we going to do about it? And that gets me to being intentional. And that means using your demographic data, your census data, your community data, your schools data, that tells you where your community lives and what their needs are and what their interests are. And so then aligning intentionally where your outreach is. So this is just a very simple chart where we said, okay, where are the languages Arabic, Amharic, Mongolian, and Spanish spoken most, in what neighborhoods, and where do we need to put out information or yard signs or do outreach or pop-ups? And so we also did a series, we're doing more and more boots on the ground pop-ups because so many people, they're busy. Some are, they're working hard. They're trying to put, food on the table for their families, taking care of their kids' needs or their parents' needs. And so really not just relying on online engagement. We get a lot, and during COVID, look, we built our base on online engagement, but we also had to do boots on the ground where we're out in the community in targeted neighborhoods, talking to people at all age groups and all ethnicities and all races about the budget and letting them weigh in right there in real time as they're walking out of the grocery store or as they're coming out of their apartment or as they're at the soccer field. And you guys get the point. And what does that look like? I just wanted to give you kind of a visual. It really does. It's us being out there with tabletops, explaining things, answering questions, and asking some simple questions in real time where people can just weigh in. So in 23, our operating budget, and can you guys see this? It's a little tiny since I can't figure out how to blow up the screen.
Brian, maybe I know you have some Zoom problems. If you go up to slideshow up at the top.
No, that's the problem. I can't get to it because it's covered. The Zoom bar is covering. Oh, wait. Oh, look at that. I can move the Zoom bar. Look at that.
All right. Problem solved.
I wish
You're good.
Mentioned that earlier. Anyway, so
I promise, Brian, I think we've just traded one problem for another as we're now looking at
yeah. Okay. Are you seeing that?
We're looking at is your presenter view, which has the notes on it and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well.
So I think the problem's got worse. But if you go up to display settings up at the top there, I think that might do it. So there you go. It's just called duplicate slideshow.
Okay. Thank you. So you're not seeing my notes
there
anymore?
You go. Yeah, this is
now
better.
It's good. So, it's good.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. Okay, so just keep going. But you can see in 23, out of 1,300 participants in the budget, this is in the middle of COVID, 310 in pop-ups. But what's really cool is 9% of those, 46% of those folks in the pop-ups responded in Spanish. But we were also tracking where we were putting yard signs and QR codes. So we had 380 people scan QR codes and 164 of them in languages other than English. We took that immediately after into our CIP engagement. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, we upped that from 300 pop-up participants to almost 900, just based on being intentional about where we didn't reach people and looking at the data and using the data. And I also just wanted to share that this was just one aspect of the analysis that the county manager got coming out of just a couple questions to really, so, taking the quantitative data, but also tagging the qualitative data and giving that back to the decision makers. We're not the decision makers, we're the gatherers. And the county manager building his proposal based on this feedback in the virtual town hall, feedback in face-to-face meetings, and then online feedback and pop-ups. So it's a variety of things. And then what was really exciting, it took us 5 years to get everyone on the same page that we could actually take our capital improvement plan and map it. I would say 5 years ago, no one was willing to do this because of equity. But when we've been really focused on racial equity in Arlington County. I mentioned the who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do you know, and what are you going to do about it? And so now we can start to show. And when you click on one of these projects, in this case, as an example, I clicked on the multimodal safety improvement military road, which is in the 10-year CIP. It pops up, and then you can, if you took more info, it would take you directly to that page. You can map this by neighborhood, geographically. And so I just wanted to show that it's about level setting at the front end, level playing field. It's about, at the back end, providing information. We took an $800 page budget, and we put the summary in one page. But then we took pieces of the budget, and this is just an example of the transportation elements, and created easy, simple to follow. And we did this in the drafting. So when people came to the public hearing, they had one of these that was what was in the proposed budget. And then we redid it after it was adopted by our elected officials after public hearing. So none of the substitutes for public hearings. The county board's still hosting public hearings. This is all before the manager. All of the engagement I talked about is before the manager proposes, and then communicating it out, making sure people know what's in there. And then the board holds a public hearing and then adopts it. And then we update all the information and put additional information out. So we're really focused, our core values, racial equity, training, consistency, and engagement, strengthening our engagement practice, expanding our outreach, and enhancing our communication. And that's all about capacity building internally, and also really good relationships and partnerships and working with trusted partners along the way in the community. So that was a lot, but I wanted to save a lot of time for conversation. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Matt. So thanks.
All right, thanks for that. And while we transition to Matt, just have a quick poll for the group here. Question is, where does your public engagement capacity primarily lie? So single best choice, meaning like, so it's, you may have it in more than one, but if you're picking one, as the best, your kind of where primarily is, where is that?
And Shane, while people were answering that, one of the things I said at the beginning, I came into a fragmented system. Today, we have communication engagement woven. We're using subject matter experts as subject matter experts. We're building internal capacity and training, consistent approaches. And I could talk a long time about all that, but we have really shifted the culture internally. So.
Fantastic. All right. Well, good. Looks like communication staff is the clear winner here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show the results. So there we go. Communication staff, and then followed by we don't have much capacity. So if you're in that group, you're in the right session, since we are talking about how to build that capacity. So with that, Matt, I think that's a perfect transition over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks again for inviting me. I'm excited to be here to talk to people who are actually doing engagement on the ground. It's such incredible and important work. And I am now sharing my screen. And let's see if I can do the right thing. There we go. Okay. So what I want to do is just kind of call out some themes that I saw, general things that I think are happening in Arlington County. And we can talk about them, ways in which you could make them happen in your communities as well. First of all, it's obvious that what Arlington County is doing is a multi-channel approach, meaning they have different channels, different ways for people to get engaged. Digital ones, in-person ones, kind of downtown, so to speak, meaning, coming to, to City Hall or to some kind of central online location as well. And then closer to home sorts of opportunities, you talked about the grocery store, you talked about various ways people could be involved digitally that are kind of, easier, quicker than spending the time and energy coming to a single, meeting, in-person meeting, or a single Zoom session. So that multi-channel approach seems critical in lots of places. Second, that you're kind of combining and weaving together thick and thin forms of engagement. And by that, I mean thick, meaning types of engagement that are about small group discussion, people getting together to talk about issues that they're dealing with, experiences in the community, different options, what the data says, different options for what they want to do, what they want to recommend to their officials, and what they want to do themselves. Thick engagement is intensive. It has lots of important benefits. It's also takes the most cost, typically time more than anything else, both on the part of the people setting it up and also the people participating. So thick is great, and it's great for certain sorts of reasons. Thin is also great. Thin is about the empowerment of the individual. It's these smaller, easier, more convenient, more aggregatable ways for people to kind of rate a preference, donate a little money, rank priorities, all kinds of things. And you saw several of them in addition to the thick opportunities in Brianna's presentation. So thick and thin, both good for different reasons, best if they're both there as part of an overarching strategy. You see lots of opportunities in the Arlington County work for addressing inequities. So first of all, in terms of including as many different people in the community as exist, and having things in different languages, as you said, different ways for people to participate, mapping the community to people figure out kind of where people are, what networks they belong to. So you're addressing inequities in terms of their participation in public decision making. You're also addressing inequities in terms of the data and the information you're giving people. All the different ways in which you showed kind of how you were using an equity lens to understand kind of what where the county is, who the services are benefiting, those sorts of things. You've clearly got kind of ways for emerging leaders to kind of step forward, for people to get a little information, to get more of a network, more confidence, and to then become kind of bigger leaders in their neighborhoods and their communities. And you're also, of course, using technology to kind of connect and aggregate kind of the opinions and the views of lots and lots of people. So these are all kind of elements of successful engagement that I see kind of in the Arlington County example. In some cases, and I'd be curious to have your reaction to this, in some cases when people are trying to do innovative things, they come up against kind of the challenge of the legal framework for engagement in their community or in their state. And sometimes that's a reason people stop. It's something that keeps people from doing innovative stuff. It shouldn't be viewed as an obstacle. As much as you can, it should be viewed as an opportunity. Because the legal framework for engagement in your community is essentially the ways in which you as a community are agreeing that you want to act together, make decisions together, solve problems together over the long term. So in some ways, this is a chance to say, okay, we're not sure how to interpret this law, which may be a 40-year-old law, in terms of our various forms of digital engagement. So let's think about that. Let's think about what our framework ought to be and how we want to kind of ensure that we're abiding by whatever the state demands, and also kind of coming up with a kind of an institutional framework for engagement that works for people and works for our community. One tool for this I've got on the slide here is the Model City Charter put up by the National Civic League, the 9th edition, which is very new and the first one to kind of really embrace engagement and equity as two core priorities of local governance. You also want to be measuring as much as you can all of your work in a variety of ways. An important way is to understand whether the people you are trying to engage value the opportunities you're giving them. You know, are they convenient enough? Are they meaningful enough? Do they get the information they want? Do they feel like their own opportunity to give input is honored and that's meaningful? Do they think that their own chances to volunteer and give service to their community are honored and meaningful? So you know, there's a bunch of things one can measure. What I've got on the screen here is one example of how to do that. It's a scorecard that we created when I was at Public Agenda that we also use at NCOC. But there are many other ways to do it, and understanding the citizens' perspective on engagement is really important. There's other types of research which can be really helpful here. Things like the Civic Health Index that my colleagues here at NCOC do, other kinds of scans and qualitative research that help people understand how engagement is going in their community can also be helpful for creating kind of a long-term multi-channel strategy. And this is the final thing I'll say, which is just that, you know, you should be thinking about kind of your civic infrastructure for this work, which I know is kind of a big leap sometimes because people have very specific, often short-term needs. You know, we have a big decision we want to make. We want to get people's input. We know there's a controversial thing coming down the pike. We want to get ahead of that. I understand absolutely there are things that you need to be working on that seem very far afield from the long term here. But the long term is, of course, important. And if you understand and kind of build the long-term civic infrastructure, then it will make all of these shorter-term sorts of needs and crises and demands easier to meet. This particular chart is from a book that Tina Nabachi and I wrote a few years ago called Public Participation in 21st Century Democracy. And it tries to illustrate all the different sorts of things you would want to have going on, or you do want to have going on in your community for it to be civically healthy. The information is going out. The information is coming back from citizens. The people have opportunities to discuss and connect. The people have a chance to kind of be part of decision-making and problem solving at the very kind of hyper-local kind of level and also at the citywide level, and that they have chances to meaningfully contribute as far as their own service and volunteerism. It's important to state, and this is my last point, that this is not just something for local government, let alone one part of local government. This is a community-wide priority. Civic infrastructure is important to all the different institutions, all the people who are living in a community. And it's a real shame that we don't have more collaboration across sectors, that we don't have more collaboration between local governments and school systems or chambers of commerce or faith communities. We need more of that sort of cross-sector ownership of civic infrastructure, of engagement in our communities, so that it's not just on local government to bear all the burden or make all the decisions. It's on a bunch of different organizations to pitch in a variety of ways, and that all of that work is centered on what citizens can contribute and what they can do. So let me stop there and turn it over to Jen.
Thank you, Matt and Brenda, for such great examples and a framework for all of us to work with. I'm going to just summarize some of my takeaways from both presentations and then share maybe some additional resources and an example before we open it up for questions. And the themes from both of your presentations, I think the first is around identification and assessment. So what is the purpose of this engagement and what kind of information is being collected and what can be done with this information and who are the right stakeholders that we need to bring to the table? And that all comes to data, right? So how do you actually gather data to build a clear mandate and use, as in the Arlington County example, a really multi-tiered approach to be able to leverage different meetings, surveys, focus groups, tactics, boots on the ground to really understand how to set priorities, identify problems, and deepen that engagement. I'm also hearing this real connection to equity, and I love that both of you mentioned that. The intentionality, reaching out to historically underrepresented, underserved communities, including multiple methods to really gain feedback from different communities, since you're understanding both the historical, context and the challenges that some communities may have had in working with government. And so that multi-tiered approach is really applicable as you're thinking about the connection to equity. I'm also seeing really that incorporation of community feedback, whether it's actually the process itself, the activities, the funding, or it's actually the feedback that you need to say, is this engagement working? And are we actually getting the right kind of engagement for these processes? And so that was really important and something that has really resonated with me. And then finally, I think, Matt, just to elevate what you said, which is developing that strong framework, that civic infrastructure for what engagement could look like between government and community, and embracing everything that we talked about, which is equity, data, accountability, and ensuring that community is at the center of decision-making and really informing kind of these long-term processes. I will also just say, the one thing that we didn't talk about is procurement. And I wanted to give you a quick example. We had an opportunity to work with the city of Oakland and Alameda County, where there are wide disparities in outcomes, specifically around city contracts that are going to Black-owned businesses compared to white-owned businesses. And so we had the opportunity to work with city government to really bring in smaller BIPOC-led organizations, women-owned organizations, to engage in what the current procurement process looks like and get their direct feedback on every step, including whether or not they receive a grant from the city. And this was incredibly impactful for those that are, developing RFPs and putting a lot of contracts out there, and then also managing contracts once they go to service providers and nonprofits across the community, and to be able to develop that direct relationship with leaders who may not traditionally get contracts from the city government, but can inform what a grant and procurement process can look like, what are some additional challenges from the nonprofit service provider sector, including the lack of support for smaller nonprofits to compete for a larger grant. And so that direct engagement doesn't always have to be with residents. As you're thinking about systems and structures that you oversee within budget, finance, procurement, there are ways that you can really engage community partners, service providers, and others that make up this broader community to inform kind of the work moving forward.